Great. Thank you so much, Kino. So happy to be here this morning. I don't know where all of y'all are. It's a beautiful autumn morning in North Texas. Sun is shining. So really pleased to be here with y'all to do this Choices in Recovery group for you today. So you'll see as I kind of go through this presentation, it's maybe a bit different from your typical kind of conference presentation. So I will be inviting some audience participation throughout, and I'll kind of let you know when those moments come. But again, as Kino said, if you've got questions, comments, please do feel free to put those in the chat as we go through today. So my name is Hannah. I am a community medical liaison representing Janssen Neuroscience. So what that means is I get to go around and do mental health education for people living with serious mental illness like schizophrenia, for the loved ones and family members who help to support and care for them, and also for providers and treatment teams. So Choices in Recovery is the platform that kind of underpins all of that. It is presentations and groups like these that are all about empowering you as a person with a mental health condition to feel motivated and engaged in your recovery journey, providing you with some resources and tools in your recovery, and also to support, again, that support system treatment team in how to support you through that journey as you move throughout your life. So a couple of quick disclaimers before we get into the meat of things. As I said, I'm a community medical liaison representing Janssen. So this is educational. I cannot provide any personal medical advice. If you have any questions related to your own personal recovery or treatment, I encourage you to speak with your own providers and treatment team about that. I also will not be discussing any particular medications or product in this presentation. That said, as I had stated, this is an interactive group presentation. So if you do have questions, please do feel free to ask those. And if I'm not able to answer those for some reason, we'll figure out another way to get you access to that information that you need. So today's presentation is Making Decisions Together. And this is all about how to have effective communication and center you in your recovery journey and these treatment decisions. So some of you here, probably hopefully a lot of you here, are living with a mental health condition of some kind. You'll see that as I go through this, this is very much directed at you. This is all about you and your recovery journey. If you are a loved one or a treatment team member, I would encourage you to listen to what things are being said, experiences that people are sharing, and consider how you can facilitate a relationship and environment that invites some of this participation and shared decision making. So at the end of the presentation today, what I hope for you is that you feel empowered to be an active partner in all of your treatment and recovery decisions. I want you to feel motivated to participate in those discussions and in different aspects of your recovery journey. And I hope to encourage you to communicate with your treatment team and support system to make sure that they are aware of what's most important to you in these treatment decisions. So I want to ask, this is your first opportunity for participation. I've already used this term a lot, and I know if you obviously are familiar with NAMI, the term recovery comes up a lot. We're talking about mental health recovery here. So I would love if you would take just a minute or so and either put in the chat, or if you feel so comfortable, you are welcome to take yourself off mute and share your answer. But I want to hear what that idea of recovery means to you. So when you hear the term mental health recovery, what comes to mind for you? And again, you can put your answer in the chat box, unmute yourself to speak out loud if you're so inclined. All right, I see someone. Oh, go ahead.
Did someone take themselves off mute there? I was going to read a response here. Okay. Kay Swartz wrote, being able to successfully choose and manage life priorities.
Oh, I like that. The choice piece of that, I like, and being able to prioritize different aspects of recovery and what's important to you. Love that. Anybody else have thoughts they would like to share?
Charlotte Yu writes, recovery means going through a long and sometimes difficult journey with myself and my support system to put myself in a better place.
Ah, I like that. It started off, sounding long, sometimes difficult, but the goal is getting to a better place, a place where you feel better, you feel more confident, more well overall. And I like what you spoke to there about that, the idea that it is long sometimes. You'll see on the slide, the very first bullet point is that recovery is often a lifelong journey for many people. So it's not a one and done situation. It's something that a lot of us are working on for most of our life. I think I see a couple other things in the chat.
Yes, Kay Swartz writes, it doesn't mean expecting your support network to do all the work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we will definitely be centering that idea today, because when we're talking about mental health recovery, the person in the center, all of that, is the person living with a mental health condition, right? So that's what we're going to come back to all over again every time in this presentation today. Thank you all for sharing. Certainly, if anything else comes to you as we go through, feel free to put it in the chat. But I love what y'all are speaking to as far as what recovery is. A couple other things to keep in mind is that recovery is unique for each individual person. So what looks like recovery for you doesn't necessarily look like the recovery of other people who've joined us today, other people you encounter in your life. And that's okay. We're all on our own journey, our own path. It's also not just about managing symptoms. It's about identifying and working towards those goals and finding meaning that is specific to you. So what gives you hope? What gives you purpose in life? And not just about treating the symptoms that you may experience. So this is kind of the first time I'm going to say this in this presentation, but this is always coming back to working with your particular treatment team and support system to develop an individual plan that's going to work for you. So another thing I do want you to keep in mind when it comes to recovery is that you are not alone on this journey. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people across the country and around the world who are living with some sort of mental health condition. You have got an entire group of support people, providers who are in this to help you live your best and most fulfilling life. But again, ultimately, it all comes back to you. What's giving you hope? What are you working toward in your own life and your recovery? So I'm going to be coming back to that idea a lot today. So let's get into this actual idea of decision making. So one of the things I love about choices and recovery and what I get to do is it's taking this sort of some of these abstract ideas that we talk about a lot in recovery and talk about what they can look like in practice in our daily lives as we are encountering all of these different elements of life and of recovery. And choices and making decisions is something that we are all going to encounter every day of our life, and one that we're going to encounter multiple times throughout the recovery journey. So things like therapy, decisions about our overall health and physical wellness, choices related to work, whether or not we're working, what kind of job, support groups, are we adding that in, other supportive treatments in, what medications to take, even where we're going to live, right? These are all decisions that we are encountering and making all the time. And when we talk about making decisions together, I'm talking about a partnership between you and your treatment team. Now, I've used the term treatment team a bit already as well. So here's another audience participation moment. I just want to make sure that we're clear on what I mean when I refer to the treatment team. So who are the people who would make up a treatment team? And again, use the chat. You're welcome to unmute yourself. Just want to make sure we are all clear on what I mean when I say treatment team.
Kay Swartz writes, therapists, doctors, family, friends, and peers.
Yes. Thank you for, Kay, I've heard your name a few times, so thank you so much for participating and sharing your answer so often already. Yes, so typically when I refer to treatment team, I am most often talking about the professionals that are involved in mental health treatment. So doctors, nurses, therapists and social workers, case managers, peer support specialists, sometimes specialists maybe like employment support, housing support specialists, things like that. So people who their job and their training is related to a specific aspect of mental health treatment and recovery. And then there is one person that I didn't mention, and I don't think I heard Kay mention either. And that is this other person on the slide, you. You are also a member of the treatment team, right? Because nothing can happen if you are not a factor in this conversation. So when we talk about making decisions together in your treatment and in your recovery, we are asking for your participation and also for everyone involved to have a spirit of teamwork when having these discussions and making these decisions. And this is about a conversation between two experts. So I know I mentioned the treatment team are the professionals who have training, who their job is all about, mental health treatment, mental health care, that side of things. But remember that you are also an expert in this discussion. You are the expert on your feelings, your experiences, what you want out of your life, your goals. And those are all things that no one else can determine for you, right? So while other people may have ideas or advice about them, ultimately it's always going to come back to what you want and what is giving you meaning and purpose in your life. Now, I do want to acknowledge that there may be times when choices and decisions come up in your recovery journey that you may feel like, or where in reality, you do not have the option to make the decision for yourself. Most often those are in crisis situations, or if someone has been incapacitated in some way, that someone else may be making those decisions for you. But the vast majority of the time, you are involved in these decisions, and it's not only possible for you to participate in these discussions and decisions, it's actually important for you to do so. We know that when people are more involved in their treatment and recovery decisions, they tend to have some better health outcomes sometimes. So, you showing up and participating and having some investment in the process can help in the long term for your recovery. So as I was saying, sometimes there may be moments where someone else is making the decision for you. But I do also want to let you know, if you don't already, that there are ways to also still have some say in those situations. So if you know that that may be a possibility at some point in your recovery, looking into like getting a power of attorney, psychiatric advance directives, things of that nature to help kind of set that up ahead of time, so you have some control over who is making those decisions and what those decisions might look like if you're ever in a position to not make them for yourself. So that is certainly one to talk with your treatment team and your support system about, if that is something that may be of interest to you. Then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, we have times when you may be the only one involved in this decision. Most of us are going to encounter those choices, every day that we don't need anybody else's input on. But when it comes to recovery and treatment, most often you're probably going to be somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, where you are getting some input, advice, recommendations, and information from your treatment team and your support system in order to make that best decision for you. So again, remember that you are the expert on yourself. So when you are showing up to these conversations, you are the one who can share what matters most to you in your life. No one else can tell you what else should matter to you. Your particular values and preferences, your beliefs that are particular to you are super important to share as well. And also your life experiences and your goals. Definitely, as much as we sometimes try to be, your treatment team is not mind readers. And so we do need your help, and we need you to share with us what you have experienced and what's important to you to get out of your recovery journey and your different treatment options. And then your treatment team and providers are the ones who can share their expertise on treatment and medication options, the pros and cons of different treatment options, provide you with additional information and evidence to support why they may be making that recommendation, and also to help connect you with other mental health support services. So not just which ones maybe might work for you, but if you've identified something you want to be involved in, maybe where you can access those and how best to go about doing that. Any questions in the chat or anything anybody would like to ask or share at this point? Good in the chat? Okay, great.
Yeah, nothing in the chat right now.
Thank you, Amy. All right, so that is all about kind of the expertise and knowledge that each of us are bringing to the table in these recovery discussions. So now let's kind of move into, okay, well, how do we take all that information and apply it? How do we use that information and expertise? And this always has to start with communication. And I know it sounds a little cliche, it sounds a little corny, but communication truly is key. So here's another time I'm going to ask you for some suggestions, some ideas. First, I would like to hear, whether in the chat or if you feel comfortable speaking out loud, what do you think are aspects or elements of healthy and positive communication? I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to think of that. Maybe put your answer in the chat.
Anna, do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, so I'm asking what you think elements of healthy and positive communication are.
We have Catherine Swartz writes, being able to air your feelings without feeling judged.
Yes, lack of judgment, I think, is so important. And that kind of the term that came to my mind with that is feeling safe to do so.
Charlotte writes, encouragement and positive feedback.
Ooh, I like that. And you're already speaking to that kind of two-way, that it's not just about sharing, but also about what you're getting back in these conversations. Anybody else?
I'd just say, creating the opportunity for communication to take place in the first place. I think sometimes the tyranny of the urgent, we can just keep going and we just don't create that space, that opportunity for communication.
Hmm. Yeah, are you speaking to maybe kind of the idea that we're so eager and wrapped up in making sure we share our perspective and what we're trying to say, that we don't always pay attention to everything else that's involved?
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's definitely a part of it as well.
Okay. Yeah. So then my next question, kind of on the flip side of that original question, is what are things we maybe need to avoid that can make unhealthy or ineffective communication? So what are things we do not want?
Catherine Swartz writes arguing or contradicting.
Yes. Yep. I get defensive really easily. I don't know about anybody else, but yes.
And Charlotte writes, oh, that's a good one.
Sounds like, I think we've probably all experienced that before, where we are thinking we're doing really well in communicating, and then suddenly we look up and we're in an argument with somebody and are so angry at them that we can't articulate what we're trying to say. We can't hear what the other person is trying to tell us. It definitely makes communication challenging. So one thing that I kind of like about this slide, which again, maybe a little cliche, the idea of communication being key. You know, we hear that all the time. But healthy communication and effective communication is made up of all of these different elements that, as someone was kind of alluding to earlier, making us feel safe to do so. Openness and honesty, spirit of partnership, being open to other people's experiences, being aware of and inclusive of other cultures and belief systems, being informed too about what we may be talking about, or having some understanding of the other person's perspective. And I think too, like looking at the keys on this slide, if you take any one of them away, then communication starts to fall apart, right? We need all of these things added into the mix in order for that communication piece to truly be effective, whether we're talking with our treatment team, support system, peers, friends, whoever it may be.
Catherine also chimed in that she'd like to add complaining about others behind their backs. There have been times I felt I was doing fine. And some group leader came to me and told me someone else told her my behavior was inappropriate.
Okay.
It leaves you wondering who's thinking ugly things about you without your suspecting.
Yeah, which is that trust piece, right? Suddenly feeling like you can't trust the people that you've been interacting with. And also, I think a lack of openness, you know, maybe it would have been more productive for you if that person had come to you directly and said, hey, this thing has been bothering me. Can we talk through how to resolve it? So yeah, you know, those are, again, you take one of those away, two of those away, and suddenly we're feeling not so safe, not so comfortable to communicate or advocate for ourselves. So thank you for sharing your experience. All right, so now let's look at how we can apply this to these treatment discussions. So these are the elements of that shared decision making decisions together. So we've established a partnership, that spirit of teamwork with your providers, good communication, that we're open and honest with our providers. Now we're going to gather as much information as possible related to these choices and decisions. Then you can sit down with that treatment team or support person weigh those different options, weighing pros and cons, looking at possible outcomes. And then based on that discussion and information, you can hopefully make a decision that's going to feel good for you. Again, every day we are making decisions. We all made the choice this morning to get up, get dressed, maybe. It's Saturday, we could be in our pajamas, join this presentation, this conference. So these are, oftentimes ones that we make on our own without a lot of input from other people, but we may be bringing other people into consideration when making these decisions, especially if you live with a partner, a family member, or have other people involved in your daily life. And then we have often these big life decisions. So these are the ones that are going to have maybe a bigger impact on not just our life, but the lives of the people around us. So if anyone does feel comfortable sharing, I would love to hear of any of these sort of bigger life and recovery decisions that maybe you are encountering right now, have encountered in the past. Even, decisions that you're aware you may have to make in the future that are related to your recovery journey. And part of why I always ask for people to share this is, again, that what I said at the beginning, you're not alone in this recovery journey. So even though everyone's experience is unique, there are so many people that are encountering similar challenges, having to make similar decisions. So I just always like to hear from people what choices they are working through right now, or maybe are looking for a little bit of assistance with right now. And I know that's a big ask for a conference like this. So if you don't feel comfortable, that's totally fine. But again, kind of these bigger life decisions that can change, kind of the course of your recovery journey. Things like going back to school, your living situation, does that need a change? Different decisions about your treatment and services, who you want to be involved in those decisions. Work is another one that a lot of us are going to encounter that decision at some point. And so these are the decisions that I want to encourage you to think, who do you want to be involved in these decisions besides yourself? Remember, you are the most important person in these discussions and decisions. So this is your chance to think ahead of time, who are the people who are important for me to talk through this with? Is there anybody who I trust and who I appreciate their opinions? Is there anybody else who this decision might affect, who I should make aware of in this situation? So I'm going to look at the example of housing to kind of look at what those elements of making decisions together might look like. So you'll see this kind of broken down into the columns the same. And housing, again, is something that we have all probably had to make a choice about at some point in our life. So for this particular example, person who is deciding between whether to live in supportive housing, that would be like a group home, residential setting, assisted living, or the other option is to live on their own in their own home or apartment. So those elements of shared decision making and making decisions together, starting with making sure that you have shared your values, preferences, and experiences around a living situation. So that can include, places you've lived in the past. What did you like or dislike about those places? Did you feel safe? Why or why not? What is important to you about how you're living and where you're living? So then taking that information, sharing it with your treatment team or your support person, everyone's going to then gather that information. So doing the research. If you're working for housing, maybe like a housing support specialist is a great resource for something like this. So looking into maybe how much it costs, how far it is from different places you go to frequently, like doctor's offices, grocery stores, work, etc. Gathering as much information as possible, and then applying all of that into this pro and con list or some other sort of decision-making system. So one thing I do want to say about making a pro and con list is it's not necessarily just about how many pros or how many cons are in each column. Sometimes it's about how much those different factors matter to you. Okay, so if you have one thing in the pro column and 3 things in the con column, now the things in the con column, you know, they're not great, but they may not be super important or impactful for you. But if the one thing in the pro column is like non-negotiable, super important, then that is something to consider when making something like a pro and con list. And then based on that, based on discussions, again, with your treatment team, with your support people, hopefully you can feel like you're making a decision that is going to be best for you, given the information you have at the time. I also want to say it's okay to make a decision and realize it wasn't quite right. That's just new information that we have now gathered in making a new decision, right? So it's okay to go back and change your mind. And I apologize, the sun is moving and glaring on me. This time it's challenging.
A good segue into a statement that John Bushnell put out there, which is, I can't meet everyone's expectations, even my own. I must be mindful of my strengths and weaknesses, limitations and resources to make good choices.
Yes. Gosh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I think speaking to kind of your own, strengths and limitations is important to consider, because that also then factors into deciding, how much input are other people going to have on your decision. And also then deciding, which of those expectations, which of those needs and values are most important for me to prioritize when making this decision, right? So it does definitely require some self-awareness and some self-reflection on our part. Yeah, thanks again for sharing. All right, so now let's talk about, again, some more specific, like treatment-related decisions and discussions. So for a lot of people, the example for schizophrenia here is about what different types of treatment to incorporate into your recovery plan. So for a lot of people living with schizophrenia, medication is this foundation for people. And then there's all of these other supportive treatments that we build on top of that. So just right here, this is a lot of different choices to make about recovery and treatment, right? So medication is that first one, that if someone is going to be taking medication, what medication are they going to be taking? What does that look like? When we're adding supportive treatments onto it, choices within therapy, what type of therapy? How frequently do you go? How are you going to access that? What other supportive treatments are you bringing in that are going to be helpful for you? So the very first thing, remember, is establishing a partnership with your treatment team. So hopefully we have kind of set up that relationship, that communication with your treatment team. Then the second step is gathering information. So gathering as much information as possible about your different choices. Let's look at what that can look like when we're talking about medication decisions. So for example, with schizophrenia medication, we're talking about a conversation between you and your provider. And there are several things that your prescriber, your doctor, is going to be taking into consideration, and information that they're going to be gathering from you and also sharing with you, right? So your medical history is an important consideration. The different benefits and risks of different medications, the side effects, because all different options have different side effect profiles, and also the cost and financial feasibility, right? And so again, these are kind of two-way conversations between the prescriber, who is the expert on the medications themselves, and you, who is the expert on your needs, experiences, and values around medication. So doctor doesn't necessarily know all of your medical history unless you're able to share some insight into that. Doctor can then share the benefits and risks, and also you're sharing, what types of benefits and risks are most important to you to either avoid or gain. Side effects too, what is absolutely something you don't want to deal with, which ones may be more manageable for you. And then definitely cost, if you're going to start a medication, hopefully it's something that you feel you can, it is going to be accessible for you long term, especially if it's something that's working for you. So kind of gathering that information, sharing that information, and then looking at the different options available, such as a short-acting oral medication versus a long-acting medication. So for schizophrenia, we have these short-acting medications. Most of us are familiar with oral meds. So these are things like pills, tablets, liquid solutions. You take them yourself. They stay in the body for a shorter amount of time. So you take them every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And then we have the long-acting medications, which for schizophrenia are given via injection by a healthcare provider. They stay in the body for longer and are slowly released into the body, so they don't have to be given as often. It could be like bi-weekly, once a month. Some are even longer than that. So when we're looking at medication options, again, gathering as much information as possible about these different types of medications, and then looking at what's going to work for you, for your lifestyle, and what's important for you to get out of your medication regimen, if that's something you choose to do. Any questions on the idea of medication discussions, medication options? I know sometimes this is something that can be a little bit murky and intimidating. And if you're anything like me, you just go, okay, and you leave the office, and then you forget to ask any questions.
Do those in recovery need to be using medication? This is from Charlotte.
Okay, so again, that is an individual discussion and decision that you're going to make in partnership with your treatment team. So, I said for a lot of people that medication can be the foundation of their recovery plan. But just like, the differences between different medications, you're talking through the pros and cons with your treatment team. So that is definitely something, if you're wondering that for yourself, I would encourage you to talk with your doctor, other members of your treatment team about the pros and cons of that for you. Any other questions? Good. And I will say, kind of that answer that I gave just then, one of the things that I hope when I share information like this is that you feel a little bit better, a little more confident about walking into that next doctor's appointment and being able to start that conversation with your doctor. If you're wondering if you need to be on medications or not be on medications, I want you to feel like you can walk into that office and ask those questions and share your reasoning, or talk through the pros and cons with your doctor about it, right? So that's why I'm here today, why I talk through this kind of information as well. All right. And certainly if any other questions come up, there are no silly questions when it comes to treatment decisions. So please do feel free to put them in the chat for later. So anytime that you are feeling uncertain about a decision, if you've got all of these different options, all this different information, using a decision aid of some kind can be helpful. So I referenced a pro and con list earlier. And one of the really cool things about Choices in Recovery is we have a whole library of resources and tools that are available for you to use in situations like this. So I actually am going to save this here and swap over. Can y'all now see this website?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So this is the Choices in Recovery website, which I do just want to point out as a great resource, tons of information in general for people living with a serious mental illness. But then we have, as I mentioned, some tools, and one of them is a worksheet like this. So this is like a PDF. I will put the link into the chat as well, so that you're welcome to download and print it off. It's also on the website. So this is a great tool, for example, to work through any decision that you're making about your recovery. So very first thing, obviously, what decision are we even making? Hopefully we know what to put there. You know, I can't say that I do all the time, but hopefully we're starting at a good spot there. Very next question is, who's going to be involved in this decision? This very first one should always be checked off, right? No matter who else is checked off on this list, you are the most important person here. You are the one who this decision will affect the most. And so there's no way that you can't be involved. So then looking at who else may be involved in this decision, depending on what thing you are making a choice about, may factor in who it is you're bringing into that conversation. So if it's a medication related decision, doctor may be the best person. If it's something related to supportive treatments or other kind of major life choices, you know, a social worker, therapist, your partner or friend could be a great resource for some of these recovery decisions. And then again, we want to make sure we understand your particular goals, values, and preferences around this decision. So this is an opportunity for you to sit down and think through what really is important about living with this decision, the outcome of this decision, right? And then you get to move into the actual pro and con list. So this is really great. It sets it up for you. You can list out all of your different options. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily just about how many pros or how many cons are in each column, but how much it matters to you. So this particular worksheet offers a star system, with 1 star being it doesn't matter that much, and 5 stars being super duper important, non-negotiable kind of situation. So then you can work through that. And if you're working through it with another person, like your treatment team member or a support person, you can indicate, you know, which each of yours preference is based on this discussion. Hopefully you're in agreement. But then if you're not in agreement, how are we going to move forward from there? Again, I'm going to circle back to you are the most important person in this discussion. So what is the decision that can be made at this time that's going to make you feel safe, comfortable, empowered, and that also your support system or provider feels like is going to keep you in that space also? Okay. I'm just curious, when I throw something like this up here, does this look like something that y'all could use? Like if you printed it off and sat down with a support person, does this look like something that would be useful for you? Has anyone ever tried making a pro and con list before?
So Catherine Swartz writes that she has, and Charlotte, yes, since the form seems simple and easy to use and read.
Awesome. Yes. I do like that it's pretty straightforward. You know, even if I'm tired and feeling a bit overwhelmed, hopefully this is something you can sit down with and feel comfortable working through. Awesome. yeah, so again, decision-making aids like this. There are other worksheets. Sometimes there are things like apps, computer programs, sometimes even just sitting down with another person and writing things out on like a whiteboard or a piece of paper in a format other than a pro and con list. Figuring out what works for you and your brain is what's gonna, what I encourage you to do to figure out what's gonna be the best decision for you at that time. All right, we back to my slide. Everyone can see that now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Sometimes, switching back and forth is a good time. Awesome. Any other thoughts or questions kind of before I move into kind of the wrapping up phase of this? All good in the chat?
Yes, we do have a question from earlier, but I think that may.
You want to save it till the end?
Yes, yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. So, yep, we'll go ahead and wrap up, and then we should have plenty of time for questions, conversation. So this is just kind of to review this. What I want you to walk away with today is how you can be active in these discussions and decisions. And the very first step is to know and share what is important to you. So knowing your own experiences, values. Again, it does take some self-awareness and some self-reflection, which, again, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes challenging, but so incredibly important when making any life and recovery decisions. So we're going to share that. Then, of course, the other half of communication is listening. So hearing from support system, from treatment team providers, what they have to say about the situation, any of their advice and input as far as which decision may be best for you based on their perspective. Don't be afraid to ask questions in these discussions either. Like I said, going into the doctor's office, don't be afraid to ask, why do you think this medication option is going to be best for me? Why do you recommend this particular type of therapy? Why do you think this particular housing situation, whatever it is, right? There's no reason why you cannot ask the questions. That should also be an indication to your treatment team if you've got questions that there's room for them to share more information and insight about the different options. Then can take notes maybe to remember everything that was said. Sometimes when you're gathering all that information, discussing all that different information, it can be difficult to remember. I know I am very much like that. I will have a super fabulous in-depth conversation with my doctor, my therapist, and then I walk away and I can't remember a thing that any of us just said. So having the option to write it down on a notebook, a worksheet, the Notes app in your phone, however works for you. For me, it helps to physically write things down because when I physically write it out, it sticks in my brain a little bit better. And then being able to talk about those options. So kind of that is the second phase of this like tell and listen piece, right? But still without that feeling safe, the openness and honesty. Can't necessarily have an effective discussion with your providers about recovery. So hopefully we've laid the foundation, gotten through all those other elements to talk through those options and make sure that the choice you're making is something you feel comfortable with and feel excited about even, right? So not just like, oh yeah, this is going to work, but want you to feel like, yes, I'm excited to see what comes of this choice. I'm excited to see how my life evolves based on this decision, and everyone around you feeling excited for you to see where you go with that as well. All right. So again, what I want you to leave with today is just this feeling of being empowered to participate in these discussions. This is all about you being able to make informed decisions. So that means gathering all of that data, all of that information for yourself, and factoring in what's important to you. Want to make sure that you are receiving the treatment and services that reflect your goals. It should not reflect, your neighbor's goals, should not reflect my goals. This is about you, that person in the middle. I want you to feel comfortable speaking up for yourself as well. I know sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming and intimidating in these situations, but you are the other expert in that conversation, right? So you can advocate for yourself. You can speak up, ask those questions, set those boundaries if you need to. And by doing all of this, hopefully you are going to be more likely to follow through on your treatment and your decisions in your recovery journey, because you have played a part in choosing them, right? So just like, if someone else was buying all of your clothes without talking to you about budget and then telling you what outfit to put on and then forcing that shirt over your head every morning, I'm not that excited to get dressed. I don't know about you. I like picking my own clothes. So just the same with any recovery or treatment decisions, we want you to have a hand in that, because we know that when you do so, you're more motivated, you're more positive and excited about showing up for those different treatments and services and other elements of your recovery journey. So yeah, this is a little bit of a duplicate slide. That is my summary. And this is the part where I usually ask for questions, comments. I also, I think we have a lot to learn from each other in discussions like this as well, from each other's experiences. So definitely want to take the time to hear from everybody who's got questions, comments, anything like that.
Okay. A question earlier is, what would you say if someone asked you to correct someone else on their behalf without mentioning their, and their means the original complainer's name?
Okay, is this from the situation earlier that was mentioned?
Yes.
Okay. What would I say? I'm sorry, repeat that one more time for me.
What would you say if someone asked you to correct someone else on their behalf without mentioning their name? And so their means the original complainer.
Okay, so like if that other person had heard what the complaint was, brought it to, if I'm the person sharing the complaint with the person. Am I understanding that right?
I think it's if we go back to the trust issue of complaining about others behind their backs. There have been times when this person thought they were doing fine, and then a group later came to them and told them that someone else told her that her behavior was inappropriate.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm scrolling up in the chat myself, because sometimes when I see the question written,
Right.
I process it a bit better than hearing it out loud.
And there was an additional explanation in the chat at the very end.
Yes, just now. Tell so and so that this habit of hers gets on people's nerves.
Gotcha. Okay, so the question is then what I say to the person who's sharing that with me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes. I mean, again, I can only speak for myself, and so I don't want to say this as a particular recommendation or advice. I think it's important in a situation like that to kind of let the messenger know a little bit of how I'm feeling in that situation. And I would be seeking maybe an avenue to open up that conversation a bit. I might be, thinking about some self-reflection of why did this come through a third party, and those sorts of situations. So I think it's important with relationships and with communication like that, when we're involving a lot of different people, to figure out why, where we may be feeling unsafe for open and effective communication. Maybe inviting some discussion around why another person may feel unsafe. And then again, maybe bringing in like a therapist or a support person who we feel safe with and trust to help facilitate or work through some of that. Because we all have different things we're bringing to the table in those kinds of discussions, right? So always bringing it back to your own particular needs, the people who know you really well and can support you in kind of addressing that conflict.
Thank you. We also have a question. How do you encourage others that the medication support group, the medication/support group/etc. is a helpful tool with shown positive effects on them to the person that thinks otherwise?
Okay. So again, I'm kind of scrolling through and reading. So it sounds like kind of in a situation where maybe you see how something like medication or a certain treatment could be helpful, but that person disagrees with it for whatever reason. So again, I think pulling in, depending on your relationship with that person, pulling in some other support people or members of the treatment team can be helpful to provide feedback and information. Understanding too, I think one of the big reasons why a lot of people don't want to take medication is because they are, worried about things like stigma, what it means to take this medication, worried about side effects of different medications, all those different things. So I think first step is always to understand why that person doesn't feel like they either need to be on medication or why they don't want to take medication. And hopefully it's an answer that we can then address with some additional information and evidence to open their mind maybe and change their perspective a bit. But the other thing I would say about something like that, anytime you maybe have a loved one, or if you're a provider working with a client who isn't as on board with whatever treatment may be recommended, I do want to say, first of all, we need to respect that person's autonomy. That is their choice and their recovery journey. But it also doesn't need to be the end of the conversation, right? As I was saying, we can all change our minds. When we get new information, we can make a different decision. So just because someone is saying no right now doesn't mean that they're going to always say no in the future. So knowing that we can revisit that conversation with new information, new perspective, may get a different answer. And then it's about maybe finding the other ways to support that person in the meantime, until maybe they change their mind.
Thank you. The last is not a question, but a statement, I believe, reinforcing what you said. I would add, 1, know what you want and why you want it. 2, determine in advance that success is worth it and you can succeed eventually. 3, have an advanced plan for those inevitable times when you feel you've gotten absolutely nowhere and want to give up. Also practice letting go of what you think is fair or should happen.
Yes. Yeah. A couple of things I want to speak to, and that was I think a great perspective to share. So thank you. I think it was number 2, the thinking ahead of time about, what's worth it, knowing that you can succeed eventually. And that comes back to kind of in the beginning when we were talking about what does recovery even mean, knowing that you're not alone. The other piece of it is truly what is giving you meaning? What gives you hope in this recovery journey? We all need that, right? Some days it may be harder to remember what it is that helps us get out of bed in the morning. But hopefully there is something, and that's up to each of us to determine for ourselves that little piece of what is the thing that makes me feel fulfilled today. What's the thing that's going to keep me moving on this road for recovery as I progress through life. So yes, love that piece of it. And then also the idea of having an advanced plan for times when you want to give up. I think that's another great time to talk with your support system and your treatment team about like a safety plan, a wellness plan, and action plan. So what does everyone need to be aware of to have in place? What are warning signs of when maybe you're not doing as well? And then what do we know maybe can help you and that will help keep you safe? And share that with the people around you so that they know what to do to support you in situations where maybe it's harder on your end to reach out for that assistance.
Thank you. Another statement on encouraging others. I share my personal story, for example. My peer support group helps me because ... I don't say you should try ...
Yeah. Yeah. I statements versus you statements, right? Kind of that same idea. And I think it's really powerful to share your experiences with others as well. You know, it's so healing and empowering for all of us to hear from each other. You know, when we're doing well, when people around us have overcome challenges, you know, it gives us that spark of like, oh, that can be true for me too. And again, it doesn't mean that your challenges are exactly the same or that what that person did to support themselves or overcome a challenge is going to be the same as what's going to work for you. But it's still an opportunity to, you know, have that support, get that input and advice, and have that cheering squad behind you as you're working through this, making choices, making decisions. Especially again, you know, sometimes we just make the wrong choice. It happens. So knowing that you've got those people who can share, you know, I also made a wrong choice once and it was hard. But here's how I overcame that. And here's how things are looking for me now. How inspiring is that for all of us to hear, right?